see that the attendees are rolling in. So with that, welcome everyone. We're going to get started on today's webinar. I'm Allison LaForgia. I'm the Senior Webinar and Events Manager at HW Media. Today our topic is Crack the Code to Scaling eClose, and our webinar is brought to us by Notarize. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This is an interactive discussion, which means that we encourage you to send questions to the panel throughout the discussion today. You can do that by using the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Submit questions at any time, and at the end, we will get to those questions. With that, we will be also sending a recording out to everyone who registered in the next few days, and the webinar will be available on demand. So please feel free to share it afterwards or rewatch your favorite parts or send things over that you might have missed. With that, today's discussion will be moderated by Terry Davis. Terry, I'm going to pass things over to you to introduce today's panel and to get started.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Allison. I am delighted to be here today. I am with two passionate folks. We are all really excited to share best practices, lessons learned to really enable actionable insights based on the depth of experience from two of the industry's earliest adopters of delivering full eClose. As Allison said, this is a dialogue and a conversation. So we're doing this without slides. It's all about just engaging you, the audience. And I'm going to seed some great panel questions to Angie and to Whitney to get the conversation started. And we'll spend the last 15 minutes at least engaging in the audience conversation. And so please submit your questions. One of the things that we noticed in who's registered for this event is that there are a number of lenders, title agents, fintech companies, and different kinds of stakeholders joining us today. So many people interested in gleaning best practices that are actionable for implementing their full eClose, which is fantastic. Obviously, the nature of Angie and Whitney's experience is from a lender point of view. And so a lot of our conversation will be geared toward lender implementation, but not to the exclusion of best practices and tips for other stakeholders. So if you're not a lender, feel free to ask your questions as well in the chat. And if we don't get to anyone's questions by the end of the period together, we'll follow up with you directly. So looking forward to this conversation. And with that, I think the best thing to do in these webinars in order for everyone to get to know the speakers is to have you introduce yourselves. So Angie, if you don't mind going first, please introduce yourself and share some context about Rocket's eClose journey for the benefit of the audience.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm Angie Cologne. I am a director of software engineering for Rocket Mortgage. I've been working in the fintech space for about 17 years, 10 of those being with Rocket Mortgage. And I've spent the last 6 years helping to build and scale our e-closing platform. And so a little bit about where Rocket is in our journey, and it's been quite the journey. But we started this about 6 or 7 years ago, and we had to come up with, what exactly was it that we wanted to accomplish? So we knew the possibilities, but we also understood the limitations. And so with that, we had two goals in mind. We wanted to digitize as much as possible, and we wanted to have as many e-notes as possible. And that was a really important piece for us. And that may differ from lender to lender, but having that e-note was really, really critical for our platform and in our minds. So we started small-ish, and then we rolled out a scaling roadmap. And so we focused primarily on hybrids, and we focused on refinance. And that was the beginning. So fast forward to today and where we're at, we seem to have somewhat mastered the refi space. And so we offer full refi hybrid with a paper note, iPen experiences, as well as RON, or remote online notarization. Not sure how much I have to kind of not say acronyms here, but we are in the refi space. We offer all forms of e-closing, so to speak. And so right now we're really focused on that purchase process and perfecting that purchase process, as well as working with a variety of title and settlement agencies, and which we haven't done in the past. And so today, well over half of our closings are digitized in some way. So that's quite a bit. We've done over 1.3 million e-closings. So we've been in this space. We kind of know what we're looking for. We're continuing and committed to continuing this journey and working with agents and working with our clients to really figure out what they want to see to be able to kind of scale and improve our platform.
Fantastic. What a journey. Whitney, why don't you share more about yourself and the guaranteed rate journey?
Absolutely. Thank you, Terry. Love hearing Angie's insight and numbers. Such a great accomplishment and success. We started a guaranteed rate also many years ago, seeing the future of digital, seeing the benefits of electronic signings in terms of efficiency and signer experience. So similar, we launched a hybrid solution many years ago, probably 5-6 years ago, and really ramped it up to be a core focus in 2019. We also started with a hybrid closing e-sign, wet sign, and really kind of made that a core competency, kicking off in 2019, and then ideally being very well positioned for the pandemic. I mean, that's probably the best thing going for us, is that we were already up and running in the pandemic, but when the pandemic hit, but it was also probably one of the worst things because it really, gave us a lot of real world experience. So from 2019, as we started the hybrid, we also built out our full RON solution at that time and started doing our fully digital RON closings. In contrast to Rocket's approach, our focus was going as far on the digital spectrum as we could, as quickly as possible. So we went with full RON to start, and then are kind of working our way back through the spectrum of eClose options. We've had a lot of success in some of our products, and RON is really, I think, an interesting area. So far, we've closed RON files, purchases and refis in 38 states. So we're definitely going as far as the laws and eligibility will allow us. Just like Rocket, our focus was refis. Refis are easy. We could really capitalize on those. We hit a peak of about 40% of all of our refis were going full RON. And we're seeing an incredible demand now in purchases. So again, purchases are focused as well, because we see the movement with the market. Hybrid, of course, is our default solution. So the majority of all of our files are closing with some form of E. Paper sign is really the minority of our closings at this point, and we're continuing to push and evolve to get everything as E as possible. Our numbers aren't quite as high, but we're up around 500,000 e-closings or e-transactions. So really proud of our accomplishments, but we certainly have a lot more that we want to achieve in our journey.
Yeah, congratulations to both of you, though. I mean, that's phenomenal results. And if I think about where the industry is today, wow, what a journey the industry's taken, right? Because it was nascent 7 years ago, Angela, when you started. And even 4 years ago, Whitney, when you started, there was a lot that still wasn't in place. If you fast forward to today, there's a lot more in place, 39 states with permanent RON laws. You can buy, or you can sell an e-note to all of the GSEs from 50 states. Now it's a matter of, implementation, winning hearts and minds, and driving the change. And you guys touched on a couple of key things that we'll talk about in our panel discussion today. How do you attack the approach? You don't have to, not every lender does it the same way. What are some tips that the two of you can bring to best ways to sort of, eat the elephant, so to speak, to drive to a full eClose adoption? Before we get started, I think it would be great for us and for our listeners to know, what is the makeup of our audience? So let's start with a polling question. So Allison, if you wouldn't mind clicking out that first polling question, we want to know, for those of you who are attending today, how far is your company in its eClose journey? Have you started at all? If no, none, just getting started. Or are you at the hybrid only, a hybrid plus eNote stage? Have you introduced RON, and are you doing a full eClose hybrid and eNote with RON? And while this is getting going, and this is just really great context, I think, for our discussion, I think would be great to start, Angie and Whitney, with each of you talking a little bit about what were the big barriers that that you hear most often when you're engaging the industry? Because I know the two of you are doing a lot of speaking. I see you at conferences quite often. And because you have such depth of experience, folks want to talk with you about what barriers they're encountering. So what are some of the what are two things that you hear most often from lenders about what they're facing or concerned about when they approach eClose? Whitney, why don't you go first?
Well, obviously, with our loan ops and our sales team, we want to, they're most concerned about their signer experience. Mm-hmm. They want to make sure that their signer, has a great experience, that time at the table is their last touch point. Yeah. So our lenders, obviously, or our loan officers, we're definitely a crowd with a lot of trepidation going into this technology.
Yes, I hear it. All right. Well, that makes sense. We're going to talk a little bit about some best practices to attack that later. Angie, what do you hear most often when you're talking in the industry about barriers and what folks are concerned about confronting?
Yeah, I hear a lot of, and I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a technologist, but I tend to get a lot of questions on how big does my technology team need to be? How can I scale this? Do I need to scale this? A lot of people come into it with the mindset of this is just digitizing along a closing, and that's couldn't be further from the truth. We're not digitizing our normal closings. We're actually changing the way that we do closings. We're changing what the closing table, quote unquote, what that means and what that looks like. And so to me, a lot of the questions are with regards to digitizing the existing process. And I try to steer people away from that as possible.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, especially, and it is, it's great that you have such a tech focused perspective coming in and Whitney has such an operational focus coming in, because the two of you are really going to be able to address a number of different kinds of issues and barriers. It looks like we have an audience that's really fairly mature in its implementation and looking probably more to scale than to begin, but a fair number still in the early stages as well, kind of a 60-40 split there. So that's good to see. The next question we wanted to ask the audience is around the barriers that they're confronting, and this will help us in our how we respond to panelist questions. So, audience, if you wouldn't mind taking one more polling question, this one's really about what are those barriers you're seeing. Are you finding that the issue is around consumers being unwilling to e-sign? Are you confronting questions about the tech investment and whether, I always like to say, is the juice worth the squeeze? Like, are you unclear about the ROI? Are you concerned about achieving ROI? Is loan eligibility scaring you? Is it feeling complex? Because I think we can help demystify that. Lack of investor acceptance has been a topic. Is that where you're at? Is that a concern of yours? Or are there concerns and barriers around the internal change management? We'll let that poll get going and appreciate everybody taking a second to respond to that. I think what's interesting about as we take that poll, that would be a great place for us to start this conversation, Angie and Whitney. And we were talking about, as we got started in preparing for this webinar, that the environment in 2022 is way different than the environment in 2021. The impetus to embrace a full eClose and truly drive to scale is very different. Whitney, could you share some of your observations about the change and why you believe the current environment is compelling to embrace eClose?
Absolutely. P&L drives the world. Having a strong P&L, a strong profit, managing your expenses. We went through an incredible refi, bubble, refi experience. And what was great about that is it allowed us to really get a lot of reps at that. But the world is changing. We're transitioning to purchase. Every deal is harder. There's less volume. And I think it's that much more critical now than ever to take advantage of the ROI that comes from going digital, leveraging those e-notes and that speed of execution on the secondary market, reducing errors, minimizing, what I call unforced errors or unnecessary work by getting it right the first time, getting it clean the first time, and moving on quickly. I think now more than ever in this environment, the P&L business case makes itself.
Yeah. Yeah. In a refi market, you were trying to drive loans to close faster to get them off your warehouse line for warehouse line capacity reasons. And now you're trying to drive them off the warehouse line to get paid sooner. Cash flow is king.
Mm-hmm.
So that change in dynamic alone. Angie, how would you contribute to this thinking around what's more compelling in 2022 than 2021 to drive to eClose
Yeah,
as a priority?
It's funny what a pandemic will do to shift the mindset, right? We went from having conversations of that's not possible, people don't want to, people aren't going to get it, to we have to, let's figure it out, right? And it's one thing that I love to do is figuring it out. And so 2021, 2020 really drove the urgency. We got to figure it out, right? No matter what it is, let's drop things off in people's front doors, and so we went from that to 2021 being do we have to do this? And conversations were more of, is this really needed? Where is this going? And I think 2022 is leaving us with a really clear understanding that we don't want to take steps backwards. So while the pandemic caused that sense of urgency, and we were pandemic driven, the need for the industry to shift is very real, and that's not going anywhere. How many of us go through something super easy and then decide all of a sudden that, you know what, I know this can be easier, but I'm going to take a few steps back and go back to the olden days of doing this. No one's going to do that. Everyone, now that they know it can be this easy, now that they know they can, save their hands by not signing so many papers at a closing table, now that they know that closings can take 15 minutes, no one's going to want to take a step backwards. So this is now a shift in the industry, more so than anything else.
Yeah. One of the things we promised our audience when we started was if you're about to embark on an eClose journey, or if you're sort of midway through your eClose journey, like 40% of our audience is, what are some ideas that you have for how you get to scale sooner than 4 to 7 years, like the two of you have been on the journey, right? Without eating the elephant all at once. Like there's got to be some tips and tricks you've learned along the way that can accelerate lender implementations to the full eClose. And so a couple of thoughts from you all before we get back to this poll about what some tips and tricks are to get going fast on your eClose journey. Angie, let's start with you.
Yeah, I could probably talk about this forever. So I would say first and foremost, we have to have very clear objectives, very clear goals or OKRs, coming from top down of what it is that we're going to accomplish, or what it is that we want to accomplish. It has to be very clear, and it has to be continuously checked to make sure that we're heading in the right direction. So that comes from top down, and it needs to live throughout the entire organization. Everyone needs to be bought in to this goal and this OKR that's being set at the top level. But at the same time, we need to have our doers, our development teams, our brain force, right? That needs to come from the bottom up. And so we need to make sure that we're meeting in the middle and that we're using our brain force. Let me tell you something, my dev teams have the most amazing ideas and ways for implementing things and ways to automate more and digitize more. And so listen to that, but also make sure that we have a very clear understanding of where we're going. Choose someone in the organization whose sole focus is eClose and how you're going to reach that eClose goal. This can't be anyone's side job. And trust me, it'll be well worth it, but it can't be anyone's, side gig or side hustle, as I like to call it, to establish this eClose for your corporation. It needs to come from someone who is completely focused on how do I make it happen. And so one other thing would be to start small, figure out what those goals are, start small, but always build with scaling in mind. And it's one thing I always like to tell our dev teams is you definitely want to focus on this piece that what I'm building, but always had that mindset of this needs to scale. This is the ultimate goal and where I want to be. And so build with that in mind, and you definitely will go far.
Yeah, no, those are great tips. Whitney, what would you add to that?
I just want to expand on something that Angie really called out, because it's definitely been important to us. It's invest in knowledge. Invest in the people that are going to own and drive the process. This is a great technology, but the technology relies on the people and the way they operate. And so having, to your point, Angie, this isn't a part-time job. This is a full-time job. And you've got to have someone that is tracking operations, understand, how the sausage is made, how the connections work, can troubleshoot when there may be an issue or something, and can answer questions for all the people that are touched at closing. You've got loan officers, your ops people, your client signers, your title agent, your attorneys. You have all these people invested in the process. You need to have people there to answer questions. And so not only did we have that during the build, but we continue to have a really high functioning, small group of people that are literally there supporting operations, tracking our success rate, troubleshooting, smoothing before a problem or a challenge becomes a dumpster fire, jumping in and smoothing it and solving for it. So making sure that your team, your organization is well supported by investing in people and giving them the knowledge to really run the operation.
Yeah. So let's stick with that a second, just as a follow-up. So, the legacy operation is certainly impacted by this change. How, and I love that idea of making sure you're creating knowledge, expertise in the organization to support the change. How have your internal teams really benefited? And I guess maybe not your internal teams, because there's a broad number of stakeholders impacted in this change. So how have they benefited? What best practices did you deploy that really helped to get the buy-in when you were taking the journey?
Well, first of all, identify all the key stakeholders, the touch points in the operation, and be mindful what's important to them. Mm-hmm. What is their job objective? What's important to them? Your loan closer is preparing documents, wants to achieve efficiencies and get the documents out smoothly. Your settlement partner that they're engaged with doesn't want to be bombarded with 10 different e-sign platforms. They want to know, oh, it's a guaranteed rate file. This is going to be easy for me. They've made the process really easy. Your realtor wants to know that their clients are going to get over that last hurdle. Your loan officer wants a happy client that's going to provide referrals. So identify and own all the stakeholders. The lender who's initiating the loan has to own every part of the process and be knowledgeable. You can't just pitch this over the wall and hope people just kind of run with it. You have to have ownership of seeing things over to the finish line successfully, where you have happy people. And so with that responsibility as a lender, we have to give people information, make it available to them, keep them informed. We want to demystify the process, questions, concern, especially around RON. A lot, lender transactions with RON is new for some title partners. We have information and we're there to help them and help them get comfortable with the process of what we can do, what investors will accept, what they can record. So we're there as reinforcement, so they don't feel that they're left unsupported. I like to say we surround everybody with love and have all the information possibly that they might need or questions that they might ask. At the end of the day, the same people are involved in the closing. We're not taking away people's jobs or role. You still need to do the work. We're just doing it in a much more efficient, interactive way than email and paper. And so I like to joke, the only job at risk is the printer. The printer's going away, right?
Yeah. I love that. And I love that you're saying the lender, the lender is key to continuity, right? You're sort of, establishing expectations and making sure all of the stakeholders are engaged and understand the benefits of a full eClose, how it works, and what to expect. That's great. Angie, what else?
Yeah, absolutely. And yes to everything Whitney said. Absolutely. And yeah, those printers are out of work. They're going the way of the fax machine, I say. But so for us, one way that I like to think about it is, you automate and you digitize as much as you possibly can. So one thing that we say here at Rocket is let the humans do what people are great at. Let the machines do what the machines can do, right? And so we separate and we focus on, we need a team member to focus in this area. One of the biggest components for us in terms of, changes and impact to kind of our legacy work was the challenge in the mindset, the challenge in, this is the way that things are done, and not necessarily challenging why we were doing it that way. Why are we auditing the auditors who audit things? Why are we, concerned with certain documents that are the title company's documents? And, so answering and finding answers and solutions to those questions was really big, but it did cause us to have to really look deep at our process and look deep into what we were doing and not be afraid to make the change, not be afraid to challenge it and go, hey, legal, do we really have to do this? Or is this just something that we've been doing since 1973 because that's just the way the industry worked, right? So definitely don't make decisions in a bubble. The communication has been the biggest piece of this. Making sure that everyone understands what our client is going through is huge. And I mean everyone, like Whitney mentioned, the realtor, the title company, the consumer themselves, right? But also our team members who deal with our consumers, our clients, right? Yeah. Those team members need to be very well aware of, okay, this is an e-closing, this is what the client's going to experience, and this is what I can tell them about their experience. So that's the communication has been the biggest component for us.
Yeah. And how do you get there? One of the things that we do at Notarize that I think many partners across the industry are doing to help facilitate this expectation management is making sure that the enablement tools that your teams have and the training that they receive in order to be successful are in place, right? You're going to have a little video for the borrower about what to expect. You're going to tell them about the tech check. You're going to have a one-pager for the real estate agent or the loan officer or the title agent, whatever those enablement materials are key to ensuring that level of communication. So let's get back to that great poll we did to get better feedback from the audience about some of these barriers, because some of the things you guys mentioned are what they found, right? And looking at the thing, it doesn't seem like anybody's concerned about consumers. We won't spend as much time on that question later because we know consumers are ready. They're expecting, as many of them as apply online, they of course expect to close. It's like it breaks down when it has to go to paper. But there is some question and concern about ROI, and we'll spend a minute on that too, I think. Eligibility is still an issue. Investor acceptance, although way lower than it used to be, right? I think folks are really seeing that the industry is opening up and accepting, and eligibility really is automated. Most partners that I know are automating eligibility. It's just those overlays around investor acceptance that probably the lender needs to do. And then the one that you guys are just hitting right on the nose is barriers to internal change management. So not big surprises there, but interesting to see the distribution. So I think it would be good to know, because you guys have been doing this longer than anyone, if you could identify one or two of the big barriers you overcame and the best practices you guys applied to those barriers. And in particular, if you could focus on one or two that are pertinent to what the audience brought up. And Angie, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. A few things come to mind. So I think one of the big barriers that we have, again, think about, this was 6 or 7 years ago. For us, it was a matter of the buy-in of that vision of what e-closing could be throughout the organization. And because we had some buy-in, but not a lot of communication and not a ton of understanding, so to speak, of what this could be, that led to us not really getting the prioritization that we needed on all of our competing prioritizations and projects and things that we wanted to get done. So, it really did kind of slow us down a little bit, not having that at the very, very beginning. So we have it now, but, again, talking about years ago. Another thing for us was, again, 6 or 7 years ago, the industry in this landscape was completely different, right? And people knew it was possible, but not a lot of people had answers. We had a lot of questions as an industry, and I'm talking even the GSCs and investors, and everyone had questions. Not a lot of people had answers. It was like, well, we haven't done that before, so what do you think? I don't know. What do you think? So it was really funny conversations to be had in the very beginning. And so we figured it out. It was definitely let's figure this out as we go along kind of situation. So that was one thing. And another thing is just get out of your own way and really evaluate your process. I can't say that enough. Evaluate your process and don't be afraid to change that process. Get out of your own head, get out of your own way, and really just take a leap.
Yeah, no, great advice. Whitney, anything you'd like to say about your best, what you've overcome in terms of barriers?
Yeah, absolutely. So many great learnings. Change is hard. Yeah. People have closed loans, have, done their role a certain way and for their entire career. We're talking about a paradigm shift for the better. But it's still, a little bit of who moved my cheese going on. People feel, am I threatened? I'm not great on a computer. I'm more of an email person. So helping them to understand, get to that point. And that happens with, with reps. If you're doing, pilot mode, you've got to be ready to break, pilot mode, put some boundaries on it, because you're only going to get good with scale and muscle reps if you've got a closer or a loan officer that's doing one file a month, and it's kind of the one case where the signers are out of the country. You're not good at it. And people get nervous when they don't do something a lot, but when it becomes more of their everyday activity and they start to build new muscle memory, and the old way just doesn't seem as easy as they once thought it was. So get out of pilot mode as quickly as possible. Trust that you've tested, you're good with how things work. But if you hold yourself in pilot mode, you're hurting kind of that change management piece. Our loan officers, they rely so heavily on that relationship, and they're so hesitant to put their customer in a bad experience. We'll talk a little bit about sort of that opt-in, opt-out. We want to opt in our customers for an e-experience. Well, get comfortable with that. It's no longer a choice. You can opt out, but it's our default. This is your go-to. So hybrid's been our default for several years. It's our default on refis for full run. You get good with scale, and so don't be hesitant to change yourself or change your model or push your boundaries, and do it quickly. Because not everything's going to be 100%, 100% perfect all the way around, but it's good enough. It's going to work, and it's going to get better the more volume you do. So force yourself to scale. And also, when you are in pilot mode, a last point is don't make your worst files your pilot files. We have loan officers that love to like, oh, well, I'm kind of curious about this Ron thing. I've got this file that's like 3 weeks late. The customers are out of the country on vacation. They're super angry. Yeah. Can we do an eClose?
Oh yeah.
and the lock expires in 12 hours. So yeah, let's set that one up for success.
Exactly.
It's already a bad file. The chances of things getting even worse are just, that much higher. So muscle reps, push your organization, take that leap. Trust me, it's not that hard. Nothing's that bad. There's stumbles on every file all the time, not just on E, but you're going to get it right more than you're going to get it wrong. And people pretty soon won't notice the difference, or will start asking for more.
Yeah. Amen for everything you guys both just said. So key. And we notarize because, we facilitate the full eClose, and we're particularly expert on Ron. And we always say to customers and our partners that we work with, please don't suggest that people start with the hard edge cases where it's an emergency situation and that's the beginning of their experience because there's so much already going on. But yes, I love it. I love it. All right, let me ask you guys. So, and we've covered that consumers are ready, and I think you've hit upon, how do you help your loan officers get ready? What about settlement agents and title, particularly because, you both have captive title companies that have helped facilitate success with refis. Now that we're seeing more purchases, what are you seeing in terms of settlement readiness, and what are your tips offering lenders for how to work with settlement to get settlement ready and able to do fully closed closings for purchase business? Why don't we start with, who did I say we should start with this one? Whitney.
Okay, absolutely. I think there has been a sea change in the settlement world over the last couple of years, obviously with the pandemic. There was kind of that pushback, but the vast majority of settlement partners see the future. They know that this is the new normal. We're not going back. Many title companies are already moving to virtual on their sell side transactions, their cash deals, and frankly, they're just wondering where the lenders are. So I think there's a great opportunity, as we start to push more lenders into full run. Obviously, connecting early. Communication, this is still people to people. Hey, this is going to be a full run closing. It's going to be fully virtual. You're going to be engaged in the process and own the settlement part. You're just not going to be necessarily doing the signing, or you've perhaps engaged your own resources that are going to become online notaries. So we're there to answer questions for title, have a solution that, of course, supports the closing regardless or wherever title is in their digital journey themselves. And we're continuing to work on finding the best ways to kind of engage with, multiple title partners, and regardless of where they are, the excitement's there. Title partners are moving in their own way, and many have already gotten to that point, and they're ready to start doing lender transactions.
That's great. What, Angie, would you suggest in terms of this title collaboration space?
Yeah, I completely agree with Whitney. I think communication is definitely the key as we also look to kind of expand and work with other title agencies. It's a matter of figuring out, what our pieces are, what are you doing with versus what am I doing? And having that really upfront, communication and expectations of whose role is what and what we're doing. That's really the key. I think another key is, as lenders, we need to mind our business, and our business is our lender docs, right? And really making sure that our client, our mutual client, has the best experience possible. And so I think in the past we felt the need to combine, title docs and lender docs and all of this, and it has to be one gigantic, enormous package. And we don't need to live this way anymore. Right. So really coming into that mindset shift of mind your business, and our business is making sure that our client is happy, and that we have good signed documents. So really focusing on that and what that could look like for your organization is key.
Yeah, it sounds like you're recommending there. What I see a lot, which is, there's a sign ahead experience where the consumer has time to see their lender docs, they review and they hybrid e-sign lender docs. Right. Maybe even the e-note. Some people have the e-note signed in that experience. Some people have the e-note signed in the RON session. But what you're leaving at the closing is a subset of docs that need to be notarized. And I think the point I would make about that last mile of the signing and with the settlement agent is that you can invite, even in a remote online ceremony, the real estate agent, the loan officer, others to participate. It doesn't have to happen to the exclusion of their being present in the signing. It's just that they're doing it in the meeting online instead of in the title office, right?
Right. Yeah. And to Whitney's point, we're not taking anyone's job away. The point is to make things easier for everyone. All these parties are still involved. We just want to make your life and your world a little bit easier. And so really that should be the focus for everyone. Again, this is our mutual client. So let that be the focus of how can we make their experience great. And one piece of feedback that we've gotten quite a bit with the pre-sign. We call it pre-sign option, but the ability to kind of sign a lot of these documents up, ahead of time, ahead of that, proverbial closing table, is, how great it is to only have to spend a quick 10, 15 minutes doing your closing, something that, for those of us who have closed on a home before, whether or not it's a purchase or a refi, can be a significant amount of time of you sitting there getting, a cramp in your hand. So definitely a mindset shift, but people love it.
Yeah. And, when we talk about ROI, that's the ROI in it for the settlement agent, right? They're not spending an hour and a half babysitting a 150-page closing.
Yes.
Right. They're enabling by adding some title documents to an online meeting that gets facilitated in 20 minutes, and they're on with their day. They can do many more closings, and that creation of capacity really assists. I love it. It's a great conversation. So let's talk a little bit about ROI before we move to our audience questions. What Whitney has guaranteed rate found in terms of the return on your investment in moving to a full eClose?
Well, we continue to track the data and look to explore all the benefits that we're achieving. Obviously, some of the financial ROI is really going to come with more scale. We want to do more e-notes, continue to digitize, but we're definitely seeing some early indicators. Of course, avoidance of errors, a reduction in errors. So not having to do work after the fact, but just get it right done the first time has been a great lift for us. I would say, number one, of course, is happy customers. Having a top of the line, market leading customer experience that's convenient and flexible for them and their busy lifestyle. Signers don't have to take time out of their day to go to a closing table in Iran. They don't have to have a notary into their home. All the parties can meet virtually. We've moved to this virtual world. They can accommodate that in their busy schedule by not having to take time off from work. They are blown away. And we see that in their NPS scores. The experience that they had was, they say it's sleek, it's super, it's just exciting, it's just easy for them. It's easy, they're happy, and, happy customers make for happy realtors, happy loan officers. It's positively impacting the whole lending ecosphere, even settlement partners, having that customer interaction at the table, but it's a brief customer interaction for a slim pack of documents and not hours upon hours. So I really think that happy customers are translating into great results and are going to be, the catalyst for this long-term, change, this paradigm shift that is really starting to manifest.
Angie, what would you say has been Rocket's experience?
I couldn't agree more with happy customers. Definitely has been huge. Again, we get a lot of feedback and survey results that talk about how easy and how quick the closings are right now. And to Whitney's point, a happy customer, I like to say, is also a customer that comes back and returns and refers, right? And then it also leads to happy team members, right? Yeah. And I also that's a big piece for me, is making sure that our team members are efficient and also happy. And so really it just creates an environment that we're just all operating on all cylinders and being efficient. Another big thing, and I think Whitney mentioned this as well, is audit. Not only the reduction in defects, on Iran, we're almost perfect, but also the amount of time that it takes to audit. That loan is ready for us to audit immediately. We don't have to wait days to get something, to get paper back and have that happen. So definitely the efficiency gains alone in audits and warehouse efficiencies, that's been a huge win for us.
Yeah, no, those are great. And for the audience, Notarize did an ROI study with all of our clients that are in various stages of adopting eClose, and found that lenders on average were saving $444 for a full eClose, and title agents and settlement agents were saving at least $100. The details of which will be in an ebook we'll make available to our audience members. Let's get to audience Q&A, shall we, Allison? I see you popped in, so you're trying to keep us on track here. Would you like to lead us with our first question?
Yes, so we have a couple really great audience questions, and I want to make sure that we can get through as many as possible. So the first one that I have is, are you seeing a certain demographic that is open to online closings?
I'll jump out and I'll jump out and say, believe it or not, no. We are in the world of smartphones. We are in the world of email. Anyone can eClose. Signers, much of their loan journey is digital. They're using tools, a digital application, digital mortgage. They're providing e-consent. This is not revolutionary. The signers are there, and no, I would say if we were to have a demographic or any kind of challenge, we're continuing to find ways to support English as a second language. I think that, but that's across the industry. But no, eClose has worked well for all demographics.
I love that.
So that's really good news.
Angie, I see you ready to jump in.
No, I absolutely agree. I think it's a misconception that I think people want to say our older generations aren't as great with the tech. That's a huge misconception. I don't think that it's any different with our older generation than it is with our younger generation. There are folks across the spectrum that are either feel that they're not tech savvy enough, which you don't have to be tech savvy to do this. But it's definitely nothing to do with demographics. That's not where it is.
Terry, do you want to jump in?
No.
All right. So the next question that I have is, looking at making everything as digital as possible from a lender perspective, do you see any value in eNote without Ron when it's not possible?
Angie, that one's to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason for that is the efficiencies in our warehouse turn times. That post-close efficiencies are huge for us. So it's definitely there, and the reasons why you want to do it, and the time and the money savings that you're gonna see with having that eNote, even though you don't have an iPen or a Ron.
Whitney's saying amen.
Yeah.
My answer to that question is California. Right. I mean, California is 25% of the business probably in the industry, at least in a refi market, it has been. And we don't do RONs generally in California, but you want to do eNotes with all that volume. And just a point I will make for the benefit of the audience is our ROI study found that hybrid plus eNote savings were $234 a file. Ron was about another $200 because it accelerates the time, right? You're eliminating a bunch of paper, moving back and forth for paper notaries, mobile notaries, whatever, but you get real tangible value with hybrids plus eNotes. And I would totally agree that it's high value to do those where you can't do a Ron.
That question, your answers tie in nicely with the next audience question, which is, how have your experiences been with iPen? Any challenges or lessons learned with incorporating that into your e-closings that you could share? Seems like there's been a lot more emphasis on Ron.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people said, we're going to go, let's just go, let's do this 100% and focused on Ron. For us, it's been a matter of during the pandemic, we saw a little bit of pushback from agents because clients didn't want to touch the agent's iPad, which was strange because they were touching the paper, but neither here nor there. That was something that we saw. So during the pandemic, the first 2 years, 2020, 2021, we really scaled back and really pushed back in the iPen strategies that we had. And now we're doing it again, and it's really easy. We're not seeing any pushback there really. For us, we do a complete, you have to opt out. You're automatically opted in to the highest level of e-closing that you can do, right? So if you qualify for a Ron, you're gonna be in that Ron experience. If the next phase is iPen, for the places where we can't do a Ron, we're gonna do an iPen, and then we go from there. So iPen is absolutely something valuable, especially in a day and age where Rons aren't everywhere just yet. And you still have those people who say, I want someone to come to my house and walk me through it, which, we just saw one in my organization the other day where listening to the phone call and that was what she said. I want someone to come to my home. That's great. We can do that, but it'll be an iPad.
Yeah. Whitney, anything to add?
And we definitely, we haven't really explored iPen as much because we see, there's a big challenge or a hurdle with getting getting the title side set up with the tablets. And so it really depends how much control you have sort of over the process to really enable the closing to go iPen. I love the benefits of getting it digital. But yeah, we've just tried to capitalize on Ron as much as possible, because if you're going to go digital, you might as well go virtual as well. So we're pushing the limit, and we hope Ron will be available pretty soon in all 50 states. There's so much good momentum out there. I think that day is coming.
All right. And our next question, how do you handle eNote in pre-sign scenarios for signing? Do they have to e-sign the note the same day as other docs, or can they sign it in advance?
What a wonderful question. And I feel like the answer can vary. What we're hearing right now, and really this is kind of like our GSE guidelines that we're going off of, and the e-note can be signed ahead of the closing table, and the date isn't necessarily a thing. However, it's up to the comfort level of the lender on whether or not they're willing to say, yeah, we're going to allow our client to do this, the day before or the day of, but pre-signed. So there's options there on how you want to tackle it. I think the industry is still a little bit fuzzy on what we can do there, and whether or not it's all legit, and whether or not investors are willing to buy that.
I know Whitney has an opinion about this.
Yeah.
It is a passion project. We're changing the paradigm. What was signed at the table previously, it was because people were there with paper, and now we can break apart closing. And I think there's a real case. As you said, Angie, the GSEs are agnostic to when the signature is applied. The note itself is not date sensitive. The note date has to match the mortgage date, but when it's signed, they're agnostic on. And that really opens the opportunity for us to think about two-part closing. Signer executes part A of their closing the day prior, and that becomes the go-ahead to sit down at the table the next day. Of course, it's simpler or an easy process just to focus everything on the same day signing. But I do think the conversations are exciting, and I really look forward to getting us more towards a new model where the lender docs stay with the lender, a slim pack goes to title, and the closing does become more of a two-part execution over 1 to 2 days or a period of days, so that again the signers have full visibility going in and comfort that yes, these are the terms of the loan. Now I'm going to go attach the collateral, the security instrument, and consummate the loan.
Yeah.
So
one other thing I'd like to add there is if you're doing that and you're doing a pre-signed model, I think I've said communication like 1,000 times today, but communicating that expectation to the client is huge. We did see quite a bit in the beginning of our journey that client thought they were done. Client thought they had nothing else to do, and were surprised when, if in a hybrid model or an iPad model, that a notary showed up. So making sure that they understood that the pre-sign or part one of the closing was just that part one. It's just the pre-sign piece, and there's still the second piece. So that's really important.
Now, I want to ask.
Good point. Really good point.
I want to ask each of you one more question, and then I want to make sure that we have time for final thoughts. So the last question that I would like each of you to get to is, what is the biggest benefit that you've seen, if you had to pick just one, with doing any e-closing transactions? Whitney, let's start with you.
I think it's exciting to be at the forefront of change. The benefit for me personally is seeing the change happen and being part of that change. And for our customers, giving them the options that they didn't have before. Not only during the pandemic where contact and, people were trying to buy homes and trying to get things done. And we had an option for them that hadn't been present before, wasn't available before. We have signers, military members that are separated trying to do in duty stations, or we had a closing with a young mother that, had her notary appointment and in the wee hours of the morning because the baby woke up. And, that's when she was, kind of giving the baby a bottle and meeting with the notary. So we're meeting customers' needs in a new and different way. And being part of that change is for me, and I think for the industry and our clients, an incredible benefit.
Angie?
Absolutely. Impacting the outcome and being at the forefront of really, and Whitney says it a lot, a paradigm shift in this industry. Being at the forefront and helping really design what a closing table looks like and what getting a mortgage and closing on your mortgage looks like for an entire industry who's really been doing the same thing since the beginning of mortgages, probably. So being on that ground floor, helping make those decisions, having a seat at the table, and really creating world-class products for our consumers, as well as our business partners is huge.
And Terry, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
The industry has been embracing digitization for years, and it feels like e-closing is the last part of the milestone that we have had a hard time getting our minds and hearts around. And so I'm passionate about getting us over that last final mile. And for lenders, I think you transform the consumer experience. You give your employees a much more predictable process, right? It's just not fraught with so much error and friction, right? It just becomes much smoother and drives a lot of efficiencies. And then from the capital markets point of view, it's just got to be gold, right? So it's just there's just so many benefits. To me, it's just like, let's just get on the journey and embrace the journey and stop dinking around, as my grandmother would say. We're just like have our toe in the water. We're just dinking around. Like, let's just go for it. Yeah. It's going to be great. You're going to have little objectors out there, little naysayers, but they'll get on the bandwagon. Just keep pushing because the benefits are huge.
And I want to make sure we get Angie and Whitney's final thoughts. I know this 60 minutes goes by really
fast.
So Angie, what would your final thoughts be to the audience on how to ensure success in implementing and scaling in a full eClose process?
I think, eClose is the driving force behind just a major process change, regulations, guidelines, and more to come in our industry. We can't scale this, and no lender or title company alone can really scale without us really looking at an entire industry needing to change how we do things and how we've been doing things. So digitization is not the goal here. Process change is the goal. Efficiency gains are the goal. So that would be my big takeaway for everyone. If I had to give you a takeaway, would be don't look at just digitizing, look at your process.
Great advice.
And my advice for the audience is don't get stuck in pilot mode. Push yourself, push your boundaries, challenge yourself. Don't be so overwhelmed that you have to have something 100% perfect and error-free. Push yourself, push your boundaries, and don't get stuck in pilot mode.
Right. And Terry, anything you want to throw in before we wrap up?
Just thank you to Angie and Whitney. I mean, honestly, there aren't many people in the industry who've had the experiences that Angie and Whitney have had, and for them to come and share freely the good, the bad, the ugly about this process and this journey and the benefits for taking it. We're just really grateful for your time and your experience. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you both so much for joining us. And Terry, thank you for taking us through today's conversation. There's already been questions about if this recording will be available. It will. You will be able to share it. It will be on HousingWire's Knowledge Center. And I think there's also a blog post coming from Notarize to give you guys some more tips and tricks. But unfortunately, we are out of time for today's discussion. Thank you to our audience. And once more, thank you, Terry, Angie, and Whitney. With that, keep an eye out on your inbox. You'll get that recording in your email. Hopefully, we'll see you all again soon.